Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. Well, 2 tutorials ago, I presented a presentation that was entitled TrueNAS Storage Driver for Incus. And this particular presentation was kind of interesting because Incus version 6.16 introduced this new feature. And at the time, I mentioned that there was one other new feature that was presented as well, and that is basically what they call a USB CD-ROM handling for VMs. And after playing around with this for a while, 6.16 adds USB CD-ROM handling for virtual machines. And basically what that means is that you can attach an ISO to a virtual machine on the USB bus, and that will now be correctly presented to the virtual machine as a CD-ROM device. And so the most common use I see of that is using that CD-ROM driver in conjunction with Windows installation. Way back in May of 2022, I presented a tutorial that was entitled Windows 11 LXD Virtual Machine. And then in February of 2024, I presented another tutorial that was entitled Windows 11 Incus Virtual Machine. And both of these required Distrobuilder to repackage the Windows ISO before a containerized installation could take place. Fast forward to August of 2025, and now Incus version 6.16 provides us this USB CD-ROM handling for virtual machines. And so we're now able to go and install Windows 11 in a very direct and straightforward manner, which is the subject of this video today. So you want to go visit the Windows 11 download page where I am right now, which I'll put in the show notes. You want to scroll down to where it says download Windows 11 disk image ISO for x64 devices. Go ahead and say select download, and your only choice will be Windows 11 multi-edition ISO for x64 devices. Click on confirm, and it will go off and say it is validating your request. And then it says you want to choose your package language. In my particular case, I'm picking English United States as my region, and I'm going to go ahead and say confirm. And then it will say that it is validating your request. This may take several minutes. In reality, it usually gets done really quickly. The next step is to click on the 64-bit download, and that will go ahead and initiate the download, as we can see right here. I moved my Windows ISO over to my Incus server, and if I do an ls-al, it'll go ahead and list that out, which is about 5.8 gigabytes, and it is Windows 11 underbar 24H2 underbar English underbar x64.iso as of September 2025. Incus will require the virtual I/O drivers during the course of our installation, so I'm going to do a wget on https://fedorapeople.org, and it goes down into the virtio-windows drivers. And in my particular case, I'm downloading the virtio win package of 0.1.271. So it's 0.1.271. And there's a lot of these packages out there. This isn't necessarily the latest, but it's one that I found that works great. At this point, if we do an ls, we have both the virtio drivers and we have the Windows ISO. And so the next step that we want to do is we want to be sure that we're running the proper version of Incus, which should be version 6.16 or later. If you need to update your Incus, you should do so now. We're going to create an empty virtual machine with the command incus init win11vm --empty --vm. So this creates a virtual machine container, but without any operating system. The next step is I'm going to configure some defaults on that container, and I'm saying incus config device override win11vm, and I'm going to make the root size of the disk for my Windows installation 85 gigabytes. Of course, you can make yours larger, but this is just a demonstration. And then I'm setting the io.bus equals to NVMe, which means that it will virtually simulate an NVMe bus. We need to allocate some resources for our virtual machine. So incus config set win11vm, and we're giving it 4 virtual CPUs, and we're giving it 8 gigabytes of memory. Windows requires the trusted platform module hardware in order to perform secure boot, so we're going to simulate that on our virtual machine with an incus config device add win11vm, and we're going to call it vtpm, and it's of type tpm, and the path is /dev/tpm0. We are going to add 2 CD-ROMs to this machine, and the first one will be the Windows 11 installation media, and we're going to add it to the win11vm, and we're just going to call this install, and it's of type disk, and the source is the full pathway down to the Windows 11 ISO. A significant part of this attachment here is io.bus equals USB, which will trigger the use of the new CD-ROM drivers. And then finally, I have boot priority equals to 10, and that will just give the Windows 11 ISO a higher boot priority than the internal hard drive. And then the second CD-ROM that I'm going to add to the system will be the CD-ROM that has our virt.io drivers, and it also has io.bus equals USB to be recognized as a CD-ROM device, and its boot priority is 5. It's a lower boot priority than the Windows installation disk, meaning that the Windows installation disk will boot. At this point, we can initiate the installation of Windows 11, and we do that by starting the container. Incus start win11vm --console equals VGA, which will bring up the virtual machine viewer. And I like to go ahead and make this thing full screen. The first thing it'll do is come up with a press any key to boot from CD. And if you're too slow on the draw like I was here, you can't seem to escape this screen, so you're going to do a Control-Alt-Delete, and that'll go ahead and drop you back here to your prompt. So you can turn around and do an incus stop win11vm -F, meaning force it to stop. And the reason that we need the force command is because we have not yet installed any drivers that understand how to exit normally. So this time, let's be a little faster on the draw by going and doing an incus start win11vm --console equals VGA. And when this screen comes up, I'm going to immediately hit a key when it says press any key. And now I should be able to wait until this thing comes up correctly. And there we go. So we have a language to install, which is English, and a time and currency format. I'll go ahead and click next. And then it says, what's your keyboard input method? And I'll say US and click next. And then I'll say I agree to installing everything and erasing the disk because it's just a virtual disk. And I click next. And then it asks me if I want a product key. Right now, I'm going to say I do not have a product key. And then it asks me for which version of Windows 11 I want. I'm going to pick Windows 11 Pro, and then I'll click Next. And then it says, do you agree to the license agreement? Yes, I do. It searches for disks and it finds that one unallocated disk, which is the 85 gigabyte disk that we set up with the override command, and I click Next. It waits for a second and it just confirms you want to install Windows 11 Pro and keep nothing on this disk. I go ahead and click Install. And then it begins the installation process. And here you'll notice my cursor is trapped on the screen, but it will say that I can press Shift plus F12 to release the pointer. So I'll click Shift and F12, and I can go ahead and make this screen full screen so that it looks like I can see everything now. During the course of installation, Windows reboots several times, and it says that up here, your PC will restart several times, and this might take a while. So anytime that it restarts, it will exit the virtual machine viewer, and you'll be dropped back to the console prompt in your Incus server. So here's where it did a restart, and so I turn around and I can't start it because it's already started, so I'm going to do an Incus console win11vm --type equals VGA, and it will come back up into the screen where it is booting back up. And so here we have the Zabbly splash screen, and now the installation will continue. And once again, Windows restarts, and so I issue the console command again. And it gave me a hit your key, and you don't want to do that because it would boot from the CD-ROM, so I just let it continue normally, and it boots back up again, bypassing booting from the CD-ROM, but it's continuing the installation. I'm going to continue with the installation questions where I say yes, United States, and the next screen will come up and ask me if this is the right keyboard layout, and it is. And then, do you want to add a second keyboard? I'm going to go ahead and skip that. And then it says you need to connect to your network. We need to install a driver. So I'll go ahead and click the Install Driver option here. And then I'm going to pick Drive D is the one that has the VirtIO drivers. So I'll go ahead and say Select Folder without actually picking a folder, and it found the driver and it went ahead and connected to the network. So at this point, I know it's saying searching for and installing new drivers, but I can go ahead and click Next. It just made an adjustment in the video there, and it will continue. Once again, it has performed a reboot, so I'll go back in, and it says press a key. I don't want to press that key. I'm going to go ahead and go full screen, and it will start back up. Okay, it wants me to name the device. I'm going to go ahead and name this Test VM for the purposes of this video. I guess I have to click on this field and type in Test VM. Let's just call it Test VM Scott. And then go ahead and click Next. And it will continue to the next step. Once again, it exited, so I can go back in again. And again, you don't want to press any key because it would boot from the CD-ROM. So I'm going to wait for this thing to come back up again. If you're like me and you don't want to sign on to a Microsoft account, rather than pick Setup for Personal Use, I'm going to go over here and say set up for work or school and click next. And then when it comes up, I'll go ahead and say, what are my sign-in options? And I'm going to say join domain instead. And I'll go ahead and type in my name, Scott. And I'll go ahead and click next and give Scott a password. And click next and confirm that password. And click next. And then it will ask for the annoying security questions. So I'll go ahead and put in something here. Click next. Again, pick another one. Put in some annoying answer. And pick a third one. And put in another annoying answer and click next. So now we have a local account here. You can choose the privacy settings for your device. And really, it doesn't matter what you choose here because Microsoft is going to mine all of your data no matter what. So just click accept. If you want to turn some things off and that makes you feel better, by all means. The installation process will continue by going out online and checking for some updates and giving you this wonderful quiz if you want to do it. And it'll say your update is in progress. This could take a while. It's just downloading the latest security patches and whatever else was not on the CD-ROM. So this can be a pretty lengthy process, anywhere between 20 to 30 seconds to 3 or 4 hours, I suppose, depending on the speed of the Incus server on which you're creating this Incus virtual machine for Windows 11. Once the process of downloading the updates has completed, you'll notice it moves on to step 2, where it is installing those updates, and this too can take a little while. And here we are nearing the end of the installation of the updates that Windows had to download and install. And now it says it's at 100% of installing those updates. So now it says preparing to restart, and I'm assuming that that means that we have one final reboot. So it gets to the end of that line and it says restarting, and it is telling us that it is in the process of restarting. And it did do a restart one more time, so back into the console. And here we go. Hopefully this time we're going to see a Windows come up. And now it would appear that Windows is completely started, so I go ahead and click on this and type in my password for my local account that we created. And so Windows starts up with the standard, we're getting your desktop profile ready. And finally, we're logged into Windows here. So if you notice, there's right and left bands on the screen, and it appears to be really low resolution. So I'm going to right click my wallpaper and go to display settings. And under display settings, I can see that for whatever reason, it's chosen 1200 or 1280 by 800. So I'm going to change to 1920 by 1080. And then say keep changes. And now you can see that it actually has scaled to the size of the screen. Next thing we want to do here is we want to go ahead and right click the start button and go to Device Manager. And in Device Manager, you'll notice that if we go to our display devices, it will say that we are using the Red Hat VirtIO GPU driver. And that was in virtue of the fact that the VirtIO CD-ROM was loaded at installation time. Likewise, if I go to disk drives here, it's going to tell us that it's a QEMU NVMe drive, and that's because of the NVMe drive that we put, or NVMe bus that we put on the main disk drive. And then the CD-ROM, I don't think that's going to be anything special, but we have our 2 CD-ROM disks that are currently out here. We'll probably dismount those as a final effort here because we don't need the Windows installation disk or the Red Hat VirtIO disk mounted. If we move on down here and look at our network adapters, we have a Red Hat VirtIO Ethernet adapter, which we installed during the installation process, you'll recall. So with all this in mind, I think we have Windows installed really great. I see that it has a couple of PCI devices that it doesn't really recognize. Those have not been impacting in the past where I've built these for any reason. So let's go ahead and click on the Start button. Let's go ahead and shut this machine down. And just as a little interesting fact, once it completely shuts down, we will see how many times we had to reboot in the course of installing Windows. And you can see here that we originally started the console when we started the VM, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reboots were required until Windows was fully installed and available. If we want to disconnect our CD-ROMs, I can do an Incus config device remove Win11 VM install. And then the name of the VirtIO disk was simply VirtIO. So I'll do the same command in Incus config device remove Win11 VM VirtIO. And now if we start our Windows 11 VM back up again with an Incus start Win11 VM console equals VGA, and I'll go ahead and go full screen on this. This time it should boot pretty quickly. You notice that we didn't get any indication about the CD-ROM, and so I'll go ahead and type in my password and we are logged in. Since I disassociated the hardware for the CD-ROMs, they no longer exist from a hardware perspective. So if I click on File Explorer here and go down to this PC, we see the local drive C, which has 60 gigabytes free of the 84.2, which I suppose is a formatted size, but we're not seeing the Windows install CD or the VirtIO CD, and we're not even seeing the devices because we've actually disconnected the virtual hardware. So I really appreciate the new CD-ROM drivers in Incus version 6.16, at least for the installation of Windows, but I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what other things I can use them for. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and don't forget to hit your notification bell, and we'll see you next time.